On today's video, we will be presenting 3 cold cases that will surely drive you crazy. From where bad influence of a peers could lead you to dismembering your own daughter, and to how a single yet simple drawing could lead to solve a case. Prepare yourself as we submerge you into the dark world of crimes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Life as an adult is an intricate tapestry woven with threads of ambition, love, and resilience. Each day unfurls with the promise of new beginnings and the burden of past mistakes. Yet, amidst the careful planning and determined strides, there lingers the specter of unforeseen events. These unexpected twists of fate, like bolts of lightning in a clear sky, have the power to unravel even the sturdiest of foundations. Now, as tragedy looms on the horizon, I can't help but wonder, were these unforeseen events merely chance, or were they orchestrated by a sinister hand? This is the terrible story of Karina Vetrano. Come and join us as we unravel this horrific crime.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
In August 2016, Karina, a 30 single woman, went for a run on a nearby path late in the afternoon, not thinking it would be dangerous. However, she never returned. This is the terrible circumstance facing Karina Vetrano. The pride and delight of her parents, Philip and Kathy Vetrano, Karina Ann was born on July 12, 1986 in New York. Many people adored her. She was a beautiful woman. Following her master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University, Karina focused on dealing with children who had autism, showcasing her aptitude from a young age. Apart from her outstanding profession as a speech pathologist, she also enjoyed writing and exploring new places. She was also employed part-time in Astoria, Queens as a club promoter. Less than a block from her Howard Beach, Queens house was Spring Creek Park, where Karina used to go for late afternoon runs. Her father would often go with her, but on August 2, 2016, he made the decision to stay behind due to a painful back. Before heading out to the park, Karina had promised her father that she would be back in time for dinner. As night fell and Karina hadn't answered her phone, her father attempted to get in touch with her but got no response. Phil contacted a friend who worked for the New York Police Department because he had a feeling something wasn't right. After the buddy organized a search party quickly, Phil Vetrano found his daughter's body around 100 feet off the main trail, about 11 p.m. She was discovered completely nude, covered in scrapes and bruises, in the most disturbing state. The next day, the autopsy report came out stating that she had been sexually assaulted and maybe strangled. It wasn't long before her death was ruled a homicide. Her body's bruises gave the investigators a theory about what happened. She might have been hit in the head by a rock. Subsequently, she fought her assailant fiercely, biting him till her teeth broke. After the struggle, her attacker's DNA was found on her back under her fingernails, and her phone was found next to the DNA in the grass. The detectives had hoped for an instant lead, but things didn't work out that way. Both local and national databases were searched for the DNA, but nothing was found. Due to the futile nature of the DNA search, it seemed that the perpetrator did not exist. They began to consider alternative possibilities, so they asked for any security footage from the area that would have shown Karina walking into Spring Creek Park by herself. Karina's pals said that Paul was one of her co-workers from the nightclub, and that he had approached her inappropriately. As part of their investigation, the police began questioning Paul, and that's how they found out that he might be a suspect. A few days after Karina's family press conference was shown, another possible witness came to light. He helped produce a composite sketch that was distributed by the media right away, claiming to have seen a suspicious-looking individual in the area within the police timeline. Then, a former NYPD chief claimed over the phone that someone in his building fit the sketch's description. The individual, who went by Kevin, was visited by the police right away, but he refused to cooperate. His refusal to give a sample of his DNA raised further doubts about him. Nevertheless, when they analyzed the DNA they ultimately obtained from him, it did not fit the profile associated with Karina's murder scene. There were no more leads after that one, which left the cops trapped. A GoFundMe page was created with the goal of raising $250,000 for the person with information that led to Karina's killer's arrest. The account brought in more than $290,000, yet nothing was deposited in January 2017 for 6 months following her passing. Lieutenant Russo, one of the investigating police officers, had a revelation. The cops, who lived at Howard Beach as well, remembered a strange episode that happened a few months before the murder. He told about a suspicious-looking individual who lived one home over on the opposite side of the street and seemed to be going about his business. "I saw someone walking away from me, and even though it was 80 degrees outside, he was wearing a long-sleeve tracksuit and a hoodie over his head. I thought that was strange, and Russo wanted to question him right away, but couldn't because the man fled immediately out of sight. He asked the same young man right away when he spotted him strolling down the street again. Subsequently, it was discovered that the man's name was Chanel Lewis. Although fellow detective Barry Brown believed it was improbable, Russo proposed a more audacious course of action, obtaining Lewis's DNA and contacting him. The cops had previously believed the culprit to be a male Caucasian, but investigators broadened their investigation after Russo hinted that the culprit might be African American. More than 300 black men's DNA samples were gathered, but none of them matched. Despite having no past criminal history and very few run-ins with the law, Lewis was cautioned for violating the law in Spring Creek Park twice and for publicly peeing. Furthermore, a caller to 911 claimed to have seen a suspicious-looking person in several residences' backyards wielding a crowbar. Lewis was pulled up immediately for questioning, despite not having been charged in this crime. This was an unexpected development as his DNA samples matched those recovered on Karina. He was detained and charged with 1 count of second-degree murder on February 4, 2017, following many hours of questioning during which the police were able to extract a confession. Chanel Lewis, who was unemployed at the time and 20 years old, lived with his parents and siblings in a deplorable housing project in East New York, not far from the crime scene. It would have been more difficult to assume Lewis was guilty for the murder if his high school instructor hadn't brought up his dislike of women and the incident that made him ask to bring a knife to class the next day. When asked why, he said he wanted to stab every girl. He was often placed in protective care and was suspended from school due to his mental instability. Investigators assert that on August 2nd, after a fight with his family, Lewis walked to the park and left his home. He was a frequent visitor to the park, so it's probable that he had previously seen Karina before he approached her and attacked her without cause. Lewis's father made an effort to protect him by saying that Lewis needed to go to the hospital the day following the murder, but this unintentionally gave the police access to additional vital information. Remember how Karina's fight with the attacker resulted in a chipped tooth? During the process, the doctor informed the police that he had removed Karina's tooth from Lewis's palm. His mother's testimony, according to which he appeared disheveled upon his return that evening, provided further evidence, and when Lewis entered a not guilty plea to the counts of murder and sexual assault on November 5, 2018, during the first murder trial, despite having confessed to the crime on camera, the police were certain they had identified the murderer. Lewis's counsel contended that the way he looked on the tape, as if he didn't understand the gravity of his crimes, had driven him to confess. Lewis even wanted to watch cartoons. Robert Moeller, one of his attorneys, told the Wall Street Journal in a statement, "It was going nowhere. They were starting to get, I don't want to use the word desperate, but they need to solve the case. So along comes somebody and the profile fits." The attorneys also implied that the DNA had been altered to serve their agenda. A court ruled a mistrial on November 21, 2018, after a hung jury returned 7 guilty and 5 not guilty votes. In March 2019, Lewis was convicted on 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 1 count of sexual assault. The next year was set aside for a retrial. But before his sentencing date, the defense attorneys received an anonymous letter from a bogus police officer, which abruptly changed the course of the case. His attorney's allegations of coercion were deemed insufficient when fresh information provided the court with an extensive record of his searches conducted before his apprehension. He asked concerns concerning various publications about Karina's murder, plea agreements, prosecution, and indictments. The letter disclosed that prior to concentrating on Lewis, the police had collected DNA samples from more than 360 black men who had been arrested in different regions of Queens, Brooklyn. It was disclosed that the police, having at first thought the murderer to be a white male, had impulsively reversed the course of their inquiry. The judge denied the detectives' request for a hearing to determine whether the prosecutors had withheld crucial evidence because the prosecution argued that the letter was meant to undermine the proceedings because it showed racial profiling. After a thorough investigation by the NYPD, the district attorney for Queens stated that Chanel Lewis is unquestionably the person who killed Karina Vetrano. On April 13, 2019, after a 2-year investigation into the matters covered by the anonymous 11th hour letter, a missive full of lies and threats, Lewis was given a life sentence without the chance of release. Being swayed by the allure of bad company can be a perilous descent into darkness. As one succumbs to their influence, the line between right and wrong blurs, leading to reckless decisions and dangerous paths. In the worst-case scenario, this downward spiral can culminate in irreversible tragedy, leaving behind shattered dreams and a haunting reminder of the destructive power of negative influences. This is the terrible story of Brianna Kiner. Come and join us as we unravel this horrific crime. It was unexpected for Brianna Kiner to become a victim to a brutal incident. As per the facts presented by her mother and the detectives, Brianna is the last person you would think would get involved in such a terrible cold case. You see, Brianna was always one of the school's popular females. However, soon after graduating, well, things went south. Brianna found herself entangled in the murky realm of organized crime before she even realized it. It began as a straightforward method of earning money. However, Brianna was much deeper than she could have ever anticipated when she turned around. Though the reason behind Brianna's death that day is still up for debate among detectives, there may be more to this crime's obviousness than they are prepared to acknowledge. Teenage Brianna Kiner was not like other teenagers. Brianna's mother claims that her daughter was never average and was always one of the more popular students. Though not much is known about her early years, we do know that Brianna was leading a very successful life by the time she entered high school. This occurred between 2003 and 2005 in the early 2000s. Since she always kept her nose clean and made sure to complete her schoolwork to the best of her ability, Brianna never really got into any difficulty at school. Throughout high school, Brianna was well known for her exceptional soccer abilities and was a standout member of her team. She appeared to be well on her way to receiving a fantastic scholarship for a college education if she could keep up her enthusiasm and aptitude. Although it's unclear if playing soccer paid off, Brianna said as her high school career was drawing to an end that she wanted to pursue higher education by training to become an esthetician or perhaps a makeup artist. There is some overlap between these two positions. At this time, her mother remembered Brianna as being very kind and loved by almost everyone. Therefore, going into a career as intimate as makeup artist would have been a fantastic choice for her. However, things began to change as soon as Brianna began to make plans for the future. Brianna studied her senior year of high school at Terry Fox Secondary School in Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. She first got to know Jesse Margison, her first long-term lover at this location. Although Jesse had a reputation for being, well, less than attractive, the two met through mutual friends. Carol, Brianna's mother, was well aware of Jesse's past. Brianna's mother started warning her to avoid him as soon as she revealed they were pals. The problem with Jesse is that he engaged in almost every unlawful activity you can imagine, collaborating with a wide range of evildoers. Strangely enough, Jesse was genuinely evading arrest by hiding from the authorities when he and Brianna first met. In order for Jesse to serve his time, clear his record, and move on with his life, Brianna urged him to turn himself in. However, as everyone is aware, this was never going to occur. There's only one way out of a situation like this, and it most definitely doesn't include calling the cops. For a while, Jesse and Brianna were just friends. However, it soon became apparent to those closest to them that Jesse and Brianna were both searching for much more. The two didn't have to wait long for their romance to intensify before making their official partnership public. This was essentially the worst news Brianna's mother, Carol, had ever heard. She was aware of Jesse's dangers as well as Brianna's gullibility. It was heartbreaking to learn that the two were now quite close, but I'm sure we can all agree that a teen in love takes the words of their parents to mean almost nothing. Carol was prepared to take any and all measures to prevent Brianna from being around Jesse. Her first effort at doing so was to call the police and ask for a restraining order against him. But regrettably, the police were powerless to intervene. It was pretty clear that Jesse hadn't done anything to specifically target Brianna or Carol. This implied that they had no basis in law to support their request for a restraining order. According to the police, there was little they could do if Brianna had welcomed Jesse into Carol's house voluntarily. Regrettably, Carol may have made matters worse despite the fact that she requested this restraining order in an attempt to assist safeguard her daughter. See, Brianna was aware of her mother's dislike for Jesse. In the hopes that her daughter would see sense and end her relationship with him, she tried to make this as clear as she could. However, as you undoubtedly anticipated, her mother's attempts had the opposite outcome. Her efforts only served to strengthen Brianna's bond with Jesse, which ultimately resulted in her moving out at the age of 19 in order to carry on their relationship out of sight of her mother. When Brianna moved out of her mother's house in 2005, she was just 19 years old. She most likely moved in with her boyfriend Jesse at the time, but I haven't been able to confirm this. As it happened, Brianna's situation received very little media attention. Nevertheless, there is a reason for this, which we will discuss shortly. However, Brianna's mother noted that she began to have more money around as soon as she moved out. At the beginning, Brianna found herself with enough money to go out to eat. While Brianna and her mother were doing okay before, they most definitely weren't going out to dine many times a week. At this point, according to Carol, she started to think that Jesse and his gang had persuaded Brianna and her best friend, Tiffany Bryan, to join the illicit trafficking operation that was rife in the region at the time. Brianna had spent the majority of her childhood in Coquitlam, where she was exposed to organized crime. This is not to suggest that she or her family had anything to do with it. Rather, it was a local problem that was only becoming worse with time. Vancouver to Coquitlam is about a 35-minute ride away. I won't pretend to be an expert on Vancouver's situation at the time, but in more recent times it has been widely known that the mid to late 2000s were a very difficult time for Vancouver, and in fact the majority of British Columbia. This is due to the fact that organized crime was rife on the streets, and the daily fatalities were occurring. Around this time, the Mexican government had implemented restrictions that made it increasingly difficult to obtain illegal items on Vancouver's streets. While this was the case throughout most of Canada and the U.S., Vancouver was particularly badly hit. As a result, there was a great deal of animosity between the several gangs that had established themselves in the neighborhood. Numerous gang members were killed between late 2007 and early 2009 as a result of heightened hostilities and violence between these different factions. Sadly, Jesse, Brianna Kiner's lover, belonged to one of these groups. Because Brianna was so closely associated with all of this gang activity, as I just indicated, her case received very little public attention. When her story did make headlines, most people dismissed her as just another junkie with a vendetta, but that was untrue. However, this also meant that her situation received very little media attention, and that most people quickly forgot about it once they heard about it. We're not sure if Jesse was doing maliciously when he enlisted Brianna and her friend Tiffany in his business ventures. I'd want to believe that he was just a person who got involved with the wrong crowd and was unaware of the true danger of the situation. However, I believe we both understand that this is all wishful thinking. The first sign of how terrible things had gotten for Carol was when Brianna started receiving money from all directions. She even traveled to Mexico with her newfound pals during this period. Despite the fact that they were aware of the clear risks associated with all of these gangs and chose to vacation right in the middle of the conflict, Brianna would make up tales about low-paying jobs to avoid answering Carol's questions about where she was getting the money for all these trips and everything. But Carol would always be able to spot these falsehoods, and there wasn't much the mother could do to keep her daughter safe. She was limited to wishing for the best. Carol claims that even with all of this extra cash, Brianna persisted in her career aspirations to become a makeup professional or esthetician. She kept paying for her classes and even had an opportunity to become an instructor. But as her gang relationships grew, she found it more and harder to keep up with them in class. Eventually, she was unable to keep up at all. She began skipping classes, giving up on excellent chances, and plunging headfirst into the world of organized crime. Speaking of Jesse Margison, Carol says she always thought of him as a bit of a loner. She didn't go into detail about his awful background, other than the fact that his parents essentially abandoned him and left him to raise himself. She stated that Jesse was perpetually in problems, and that she thought Brianna was drawn to Jesse because she thought she could save him or otherwise assist him. However, she also acknowledged that after living as a good girl for so long, Brianna might have found the bad boy lifestyle intriguing. In actuality, we simply don't know. Brianna, according to Carol, never stopped searching for a way out. However, the issue lies in the fact that the allure of the money was simply too strong to resist. She claims that whenever she would talk to Brianna about leaving the company, Brianna would always come up with an excuse like, "I'll leave once I make X amount of money." However, this money would always go up and never be sufficient. Brianna's mother nevertheless kept inviting Jesse to dinners and get-togethers with the family. Rather than doing this for Jesse's benefit, she did it to let her daughter know that she would support her in the event that things failed, which she knew would inevitably happen. It's only that she could never have predicted how quickly everything would go bad. The beginning of it was when Jesse betrayed Brianna. Carol claims that although she was aware of Jesse's sly behavior, she also understood that it was just a way of life. Jesse believed he was superior to everyone and everything, even the law and his own lover. Carol recognized that Brianna was being mistreated, but there wasn't much Carol could do because Brianna wouldn't listen to logic. However, that was the beginning of things getting incredibly bad. Brianna started to behave differently. Brianna had always been known to be an extroverted and cheerful girl, but suddenly everything changed. She was once fearless, strong, and self-assured, but these days it appeared like she jumped at the first shadow and was constantly looking behind her. Carol claims that when Brianna began keeping the drapes closed all the time, even on gorgeous sunny days, she realized how awful things had gotten. Brianna confessed something horrifying when Carol questioned her daughter about why she was acting so alone, and it's like she was hiding away in her own house. "Mom, they can't know where we live," she murmured. Brianna Kiner has fallen to an all-time low by 2007. Following an apartment raid, she was taken into custody and accused of trafficking in illicit goods. In addition to these accusations against her, Jesse and Tiffany were also named in the indictment. Brianna was really upset about this, and that would be a major understatement. Since Jesse was the one who caused the problem in the first place, Brianna insisted that he was prepared to accept full responsibility for it. It is stated that Brianna was not involved in the gathering or distribution of these illicit items. Sadly, though, the lease for the apartment where everything was discovered had her name on it, leading authorities to conclude that she had participated in the scheme. Later on, it would also be revealed that investigators think Brianna was actually responsible for the distribution of these products. They saw her as equally guilty as Jesse. According to Carol, this marked the beginning of the end for Brianna. It was the end of her life as she knew it. She had always dreamed of traveling the world and experiencing the many places in America, but since she was a felon, she was unable to even leave the nation. Soon after, Jesse was involved in a series of violent incidents, almost losing his life after being shot many times during a fight. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like Brianna was there for it all. The fact that Jesse made it to the hospital at all is considered a miracle, according to the medical staff, and he ultimately recovered completely. This circumstance served as a bit of a wake-up call for Brianna. The only issue was that there was no way out. No matter how awake Brianna became, there was nowhere to go. She knew too much by now, and too many of her competitors were aware of her identity. There was nowhere to go. Fortunately, Brianna did in fact part ways with Jesse at this same time, but within a few weeks she returned to him, as is common for many victims of abusive relationships. Even worse, Brianna began abusing the drugs she was selling around the same time, so things weren't getting any better when she added addiction to the mix. She probably went back to him because she wanted her next fix, and he was the only one who could give it to her, in addition to the fact that she missed him. Brianna ultimately decided to break things off with Jesse after many more months had gone. She even moved to a new address that only her immediate family knew about, packing up everything she owned. Jesse, though, was unwilling to part with it. At this point, one of the many offenses he had done had landed him in prison. He and Brianna corresponded frequently, but in late 2008 or early 2009, Brianna sent him one last letter in which she announced the end of their relationship. However, Jesse had one of his gang members monitor Brianna from inside prison walls, and he discovered her new address almost immediately, which put Brianna right back in the thick of things. And thus we arrived in February of 2009. Brianna had been driving through a residential neighborhood in the Coquitlam region. When everything went wrong, she was operating a truck that she had borrowed from her friend Tiffany, who had also been heavily involved in the illegal trafficking operation. The specifics of the incident have never been established. As far as I can tell, no witnesses existed, or at least none who were prepared to come forward. However, Brianna was discovered on February 5, 2009 at approximately 7 p.m. following her truck's stop on Oxford Street, which is located immediately south of Mason. She was slumped over in the driver's seat with a damaged window on that side of the truck when she was discovered by police officers doing routine patrols. After being hit by a single round, she died in a matter of seconds and nobody saw anything. Brianna had learned just days before that she was supposed to appear in court on her allegations of dealing in illicit items. However, Brianna wouldn't survive to see her court date, as is the case with a great deal of people in similar circumstances. Alone in a borrowed car on the gloomy Coquitlam streets, she lost her life. The worst thing is that it's unclear if she was the intended victim at all. This case has never had a suspect named, and since it included gangs, it's almost a given that none will ever be. In actuality, it was probably a group of people who wanted to make sure Brianna didn't divulge any secrets to the police when her court date arrived, rather than just one individual. The most bizarre aspect of Brianna's case, though, is that detectives think there's a good chance she died as a result of a straightforward case of mistaken identity. Many investigators think that Tiffany might have been the target because she was operating Tiffany's truck. The reason Brianna was parked there the night she died has never been disclosed. It has been verified, nevertheless, that Brianna continued to deal aggressively while Jesse was away. Although it's never been verified, it's reasonable to infer that she was there to close a deal. As previously stated, Brianna was only one of 3 individuals connected to local gangs that perished on that same day. The situation indicates that between January and July of 2009, at least 41 people died, all of whom had a direct connection to the company Brianna had worked for. Although Brianna was among the initial victims of these gangs, she was by no means the final one. Really, we have no idea if she was aware of any gang secrets that would be valuable to divulge. She might not have been the original target. Thus, it's very likely that she died that day for no apparent reason at all. All in all, it's terrible because Brianna was aware of the risks associated with her way of life. She was an exceptionally intelligent girl who excelled academically and never got into trouble. But there was something about this Jesse guy that possessed her almost supernaturally. Everything else simply vanished from her view because she was so consumed by her desire to be with Jesse. The one positive aspect of this tale is that Tiffany, Brianna's friend, seems to have survived. It was kind of a wake-up call for Tiffany after Brianna died in her car. And from what I can tell, Tiffany was able to leave the company. I was able to verify that Tiffany had secured a more conventional position and stayed onto it for a minimum of 6 to 8 months following Brianna's death, but after that, Tiffany's story essentially ends. Jesse Margison, on the other hand, is a little harder to find. He was being held pending trial in 2012 when he was brutally attacked by a bunch of fellow prisoners who, you guessed it, were probably members of an opposing gang. They did him some serious damage, but in the aftermath, the government of British Columbia gave him a $3 million award. Following the assault on Jesse and another prisoner, it was found that the guards and officers had failed to protect the 2 men, and as a result, the 2 men received substantial compensation. Nevertheless, Jesse almost disappears from the scene after 2016. I don't know if he's still behind bars or in prison, or if he's out and enjoying life to the fullest with $3 million in the bank. There was no mention of him following this settlement. Regretfully, it appears that Brianna's mother, Carol, was the true victim of this whole ordeal. Naturally, Brianna is no longer here to experience the fallout from everything that happened. Tiffany and Jesse are no longer in the photo. Carol has essentially been abandoned to sort through the debris by herself. However, she is making every effort, I mean absolutely every effort, to make sure her daughter is remembered. She has even made it her mission to assist, encourage, and provide a shoulder to cry on for other women who have been thrust into similar circumstances. Carol is doing everything in her power to ensure that Brianna's memory endures forever and serves as a beacon of hope for others who feel hopelessly lost in the dark, even if Brianna is no longer with us. Carol is lucky in that she doesn't regret how she handled the situation. Although she is aware that she did everything in her power to keep her daughter safe, her daughter nevertheless made choices that took her down one of the worst possible routes. An evil apparition that lurked in the shadows abruptly shattered the innocence of a small girl in a peaceful village. Her chuckles became sobs, yet the night did not break. The village grieved the loss of a priceless life snatched far too soon, and sorrow pervaded the air the following morning. A 13-year-old girl vanished from Orange County, Florida on February 26, 2024. A profound secret that no one could have possibly guessed was revealed by the dead body that was discovered a few days later. How did this little girl pass away? And what was this secret? This is the terrible story of Madeline Soto. Come and join us as we work to solve this horrifying crime. One where justice was not served by the law and there was much anguish and suffering. It would be like taking your first step into adolescence and falling, never to rise again, to celebrate becoming 13 only to pass on the following day. On February 25th, Madeline Soto celebrated turning 13. The next day, she was meant to be leaving Village Park Drive in Kissimmee, close to Orlando, for school. Stephen Stern, her mother's lover, says he dropped her off close to Hunter Creek Middle School, but she never showed up for class. When Madeline's mother went to take her up later that day, she discovered she was missing. She had no idea where her daughter was or what was going on in her life up until that point, as would soon become evident. Remarkably, Madeline's phone was left at home. At approximately 8 p.m., she was reported missing. That day. Was Soto still alive, and where had she gone? The last sighting of Madeline, a 5'1" child with blue eyes and blonde hair, was of her sporting white Crocs, black shorts, and a green hoodie. The Orange County Sheriff's Office released a statement regarding Madeline Soto's disappearance on February 27th and urged anyone with information to come forward. In an attempt to locate her, the Sheriff's Office launched a massive search on February 28th. After more than 50 police officers searched the surrounding woods for Soto, they found messages on her phone indicating that she intended to move into the woods after turning 13. Could she have entered the woods by herself? The area where Madeline was last seen, locations they had gotten tips about, and regions they had determined from their investigations were all extensively examined by deputies. They searched everywhere, but they were unable to locate her. What happened to Madeline was the nagging question on everyone's mind, but few realized how deeply Florida will be shaken by the following announcement made by the authorities. On Thursday night, Madeline's mother received a somber message from Sheriff John Mina, stating that they were certain Madeline had passed away. At 8:19 a.m., deputies were aggressively looking for her corpse. Madeline was seen in that car when Stephen Stearns returned to the complex, and we think she was already dead at that point, the sheriff stated. According to Mina, the Orange County Sheriff's Office possessed video proof of Mr. Stearns throwing away things at 7:35 a.m., including her backpack and laptop from school, in a dumpster behind their apartment building. Madeline's body was found, and Florida police stated this on Friday. The local sheriff's office regretfully verified their suspicions of her death after a 4-day search. The second announcement was made after it became clear from the dead body that something horrible had occurred to Madeline, and the authorities were determined to find out what it had been. When forensically reviewing Stern's phone during the Madeline missing investigation, detectives from the Orange County Sheriff's Office discovered unsettling photographs. Additionally, attempts to remove evidence were discovered. Subsequent examinations demonstrated that these offenses took place at the Kissimmee family residence. Detectives from the Kissimmee Police Department were notified right away, and they are currently working with the Criminal Investigations Section to lead the sexual battery case. It became apparent that Madeline may have been the victim of sexual abuse by Stern for some years, and that this may have contributed to Madeline's demise. A second arrest order for Mr. Stearns was issued on Monday, March 4th. According to this warrant, Madeline was abused by him at least since 2022, when she was just 11 years old. Madeline's stepfather, Stephen Stearns, was named as the main suspect in her disappearance. However, he was not prosecuted in relation to her death. Even though he was accused of sexually abusing a kid, the case against Madeline was still being looked at. The Kissimmee Police Department released a statement saying that investigators were able to get an affidavit showing Stearns gave permission for his phone to be searched, even though he claimed to have unintentionally reset it. On February 26, 2024, investigators found horrifying photos and videos showing child sexual assault, despite efforts to remove the material. The dates on these materials match Madeline's age, which was August 2022. Madeline was seen inside Stearns' automobile in security footage that was made public during a later news conference, implying that she had already passed away. Stearns insisted on being innocent, saying that after dropping Madeline off, everything appeared to be going as usual. But Jen Soto, Madeline's mother, gave a different account. She said she had heard from the middle school that Madeline was saw on surveillance footage strolling close to the church, but she never made it to the school. Pictures of Mr. Stearns' vehicle, which he was operating between 1 p.m., were released by Kissimmee police, and 2:30 in the afternoon. At the moment, it's thought that his car had a flat tire. That concerns just Stearns. What about Jen Soto, the mother? Is she truly without fault? Was she unaware of the events involving her daughter in the same home that she had been residing in? The police were shocked to learn that Jen's account differed greatly from what they had previously been told. The video evidence shows that Madeline was being abused by her mom's boyfriend. The same location where they had all been residing is where the abuse took place. On the morning of February 26th, Madeline was probably already dead, according to Orange County Sheriff John Mina. At a press conference, he revealed that police concluded Madeline was presumed dead at the time of the drop, as she had never been dropped off close to her school that morning. At 7:35 a.m., Stearns was seen on surveillance footage from the family's apartment building throwing Madeline's stuff in the garbage, and later footage recorded at 8:19 a.m. revealed Madeline, who was thought to be dead, in Stearns' car. Detectives from different agencies have interviewed Jennifer Soto several times, and they're carefully going over every statement she has given. Take a look at her body language and demeanor when she was asked about Madeline during an interview. It was shocking.
Close to the school. She wanted to walk the rest of the way. Sorry. That should be it. Sorry about that.
Her seemingly inane body language raised suspicions among specialists that she may have lied throughout the interview. After their 13-year-old has been missing for days, who in their right mind would pull such a face? Detectives are also looking into allegations made by Stearns, such as his assertion that he left Madeline off at school the morning before she vanished. Law enforcement officials, however, think Madeline was already dead that morning and that Stearns never drove her to school. This claim is strengthened by the body language analysis that proves specialists were positive Stearns was lying during the interview. The department grew increasingly wary of Stearns as it became clear that he was acting emotional and wiping away fake tears. The Madeline Soto and Stephen Stearns statements were taken over by the Kissimmee Police Department, who have not yet made an official statement but are reportedly attentively reviewing all of the available material. The investigation is not over yet, though. There has been a good deal of media coverage and debate surrounding this case. Stearns was exclusively represented by his attorney throughout the proceedings and opted not to make his initial appearance in Osceola County Court. Stearns was denied a bond by the judge. In other news, the police have come under fire for inadvertently sharing unsettling photos connected to the case. After inadvertently posting a graphic photo of the corpse of murdered 13-year-old Madeline Soto on Instagram, they have come under fire. Madeline's body was allegedly visible in a close-up picture of the crime scene that the county sheriff, Marcos Lopez, shared on social media. The photograph was posted on Instagram alongside other pictures, the third of which included Madeline's body. The post's caption included the phrase, "A great day with our seniors," and hashtags for Florida and seniors, along with an emoji of a halo happy face. An Osceola County representative later apologized for what was described as a horrific accident and said the photo was never intended to be part of the social media post. The event happened the same morning when Stephen Stearns, the main suspect in the investigation, and Narava Rodriguez, another civilian employee of the sheriff's office, took a selfie. Rodriguez's post was later taken down. In a statement, State Attorney Andrew Bain expressed his displeasure with the unintentional distribution of the images and said it was done in bad taste. While I do not believe these photos will have any evidentiary impact on the case as of now, they were released in poor taste, the statement read. I am deeply disturbed that the photos were carelessly made public. The Kissimmee police have reassured the public that they are actively working to bring closure to the case, even if no charges have been filed for Madeline's murder. They stated, quote, We understand the desire for updates, and we assure you that every effort is being made to get justice for Madeline. Our detectives and forensic unit are working tirelessly to uncover the truth behind this heartbreaking incident. At this time, we are unable to release any further information as this remains an active and sensitive investigation. Dr. Maria Vasquez, the superintendent of Orange County Public Schools, offered condolences and honored the pupil. My prayers and condolences are with Maddie's family and the school community. It is very distressing, especially for family and friends, to lose a kid so terribly and abruptly. Counselors are still on hand to assist any staff members or students who need help processing the news. I kindly request that you remember to pray for the whole Hunter Creek Middle School community as they mourn the loss of a loved one. The Kissimmee Police Department is in charge of the inquiry and will keep gathering and analyzing evidence as part of its ongoing investigation into Madeline's death. Items collected at the scene of Madeline's death, forensic evidence, and video recordings could all be included in this evidence. Only crimes pertaining to what was discovered inside the residence and on his cell phone are now being brought against the suspect. Fortunately, he is being detained without the possibility of bond, which allows investigators and prosecutors to collaborate closely in order to guarantee that, should he be formally charged with Madeline's murder, which appears highly likely, the case will be solid and well supported. In order for law enforcement to provide a comprehensive report regarding Madeline's fate, a number of critical components must come together. The state attorney will then analyze this material, carefully examining the facts before determining the course of the legal proceedings.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. Check out this other thrilling videos for you to watch, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe and like button, and let us know down below your thoughts on today's case. Until then, take care.